Hello everybody, welcome back to Highfleet. We are sitting in the Shipbuilder in version 1.14 and it's time to build the ships that we're going to take into our hard mode campaign in this patch. Before I start, I just want to thank everyone who's been making comments and posts on my last couple of videos. I really appreciate it, including the people who made comments on the Reddit thread as well, especially Grimfleet, Trifler, Azura von Kaiser, and Binky ATX. You've had some really good insights to add to some of the designs and ideas that I've got, so thank you so much for making those posts. I've gone through your guides, Trifler especially, looked at your early game fleet change-up guide. It's been really handy. I highly recommend it for someone who's starting the game looking for some small tweaks to make to their ships. And I want to do something in this video that's probably going to make all of you annoyed, because I'm actually going to go ahead with my plan to build a lightning-like early strike ship that I want to use in this upcoming campaign to take early garrisons. And I know that a lot of people think this is not a good idea because the ship is going to be very easy to kill with proximity fuse ammo, and I totally get that. But the idea is I want a cheap-ish ship that can go very fast and move out with one of our tanker tenders just to take territory. If it manages to take 2-3 spaces for me and recruit a Tarkin, I'm happy with what it's done. Maybe down the line I'll be able to refit it with some armor and get it into a position where it can help out with our bigger ship, which we're going to be taking to take on bigger garrisons. I've spent a lot of time coming up with an idea for this design and trying lots of different designs. And the big sort of stop-go point for me with this ship, the big testing point, is gladiators. If you try to build a fast ship that can build a gladiator, you just end up in exactly what, especially what Binky ATX was saying in the comments, a situation where the ship just gets exponentially heavier, more engines, more fuel, more ammo, and you lose the core concept of the ship. Especially if you start adding armor to a ship like this, you just lose the whole idea behind it. So I've decided that it's just going to have to be this ship will not be able to kill gladiators. That's my endpoint. Now, there are gladiators in some early game garrisons, but I've done a lot of tests, and at least in the first few, which is what I want this ship to be able to deal with, we don't run into too many of them. If they do, we're going to have to pivot and deal with that. But I want a fast ship that can do that. So I'm going to build that ship in this video, and if you don't like it, well, you can watch me fail when I start doing the campaign and feel vindicated in that. Now, I have a way of building ships that I think is a bit different from everybody else. I'm going to showcase it here. What I like to do is lay out all the components I want to put on my ship before I start building it. That gives me an idea of how much hull I'm going to need to fill up. And I've thought a lot about the armaments for this ship, and really there's two main choices, the AK-100 and the D80 Molot. The other options that could exist are 57mm from the Vermpel, the AK-725, and I could potentially go up to the Mark 180, which is the 180mm gun. I feel like the 75mm is honestly just, sorry, the 57mm is just a little bit too light for this ship. Really, the 57mm shines en masse. If you have a ship that's mounting like 5-6 of them, they can really drill through armor and do a lot of damage. But on a ship this big, it's too small. I'm only going to be able to mount 2 guns. The 180mm for me is a sniper cannon. It's very high damage, very slow reload, very slow projectile speed. Great on a very big, powerful ship that you can sit in one space and line the shots up with. But we all know how bad a shot I am, and this ship's going to be moving fast. I don't think I'm going to be able to lead shots well enough with this. So that leaves us with the AK-100 and the D80 Molot, so the difference between 130mm and 100mm. I actually really like the AK-100, especially on a light ship. It's got a high fire rate, the projectiles move very, very fast, it reloads very, very quickly, it's a very forgiving gun, and I need forgiveness. This gun is very, very good. I really like the D80 Molot. I think it really shone in our last campaign. But for me, I think for this light fast ship, I want 2 AK-100s. This has an added bonus for us as well, because this means that I can have a split in ammunition types. My bigger, more heavier ship that I'm going to be building in a different video, that's going to use D80 Molots. And now I've got 100mm ammo for my smaller ships, and I've got 130mm ammo for my bigger ships, and I don't have to worry about using up the stock or balancing between them. Also, 100mm ammo in general is cheaper. So we're going to go with one of these. Now, in order to stock one of these, I'm either going to need one large ammo component, because each of these requires 1 ammo, and this provides 2, or I'm going to need 2 small ones. The 2 small ones in general weigh a little bit more than 1 big one, but they take up a lot less room, and that's leading me towards using the 2 small ones. I'm also going to need roughly 1 large generator to power either all of this or all of this. It doesn't quite come to the 6.1 megawatts that this generator provides, but it's close enough that 1 large generator covers all of this. Now, in terms of propulsion, very important, I want 2 D30Ss. The D30S is a very interesting engine. In low quantities on a light ship, they provide a massive amount of thrust and, importantly, range and speed. but there's definitely a tipping point where if you start adding too many of these, they fall off quite quickly and start to not really carry their weight very well. So I'm just going to try 2 of these to start with, but I want to add at least 4 NK25s to give it a lot of maneuverability. But honestly, ideally, I want to go with 5, which is a lot of engine for a small ship. But this thing needs to move fast because it's not going to have any armor at all. We'll see how this goes and how I place it on. To power all of this, I'm going to need probably at least 1 more MGU 61. So that's everything that should power all of this. Other chassis parts I don't want to forget about. I'm going to need 2 landing gear, so I'm just going to add them to my blueprint board so I don't forget to add them onto the ship, because I quite often do that and then I have to add a landing gear on later. Fuel tanks, I would like to aim, if I can, for 6 fuel. With this amount of engines, that should give me about 2 minutes of combat time. If I'm not thrusting constantly. And for me, that should be enough to deal with the larger garrisons that we're going to be dealing with in hard mode. If I was playing an easier campaign, I could probably get away with 4 fuel tanks. And I may not even be able to mount all 6 of these, but this is my target. For every 2 fuel tanks, I would like 1 fire suppression system. So I'd like to ideally have 3 fire suppression on the ship as well, if I can get away with it. Now, on top of that, I also need to have some defense systems. I would really like to mount at least 2 flare launchers, but preferably 4 flare launchers on this ship if I can get away with it. Because this will really help me extremely with dealing with those missiles in the early game. And honestly, I've been sleeping on flare launchers. They are fantastic, especially because they reload for free and they have a lot of ammunition. I also want to add, if I can, 2 Zenith missiles and not forget about them and use them as a blade of armor, which I've been doing all the way up till now, because this will help me punch above my weight with some of the bigger ships that we're going to be dealing with in the early game. So this is the components that I want to fit into this ship. So I have to build my ship based around this. Now, the one thing I haven't included here is crew quarters. I'm hoping, if I've done my maths right, we won't need to add crew quarters to this ship. In fact, we'll be just under, but once we fire the missiles, we won't need the crew for those missiles and we should be okay. So this is my components for this ship. And I have a few sort of design choices I want to make. The first, let's actually talk about a couple of other things that have happened in the 1.14 patch just very quickly. The biggest changes that have been made in the 1.14 patch is these triangular hull pieces, both the big ones and the small ones in reinforced normal hull, have been made to weigh the same tonnage as a square hull piece. This means that the advantage previously on these triangular hull pieces was you could mount components in them, but they weighed a lot less than the rest of the pieces, and it made them very, very attractive. Now to me at least, they've lost a lot of that attractiveness. They weigh too much, and especially in a ship like this, I want to make it light and small. Something to watch out for as well, this hull piece here with the 2 sort of corners is actually very heavy. It's actually heavier than this. You want to avoid that. Although weirdly, with the reinforced hull, it's actually the lightest. Sometimes the numbers just don't add up. This piece here is now the lightest piece. So I think, if I remember off the top of my head, this weighs 26 tons and this piece weighs 24 tons. So we're going to use a lot of these just to get a little bit of extra weight. Again, with the small hull pieces, this triangular piece weighs the same as this square hull piece. So I want to avoid using it if I can. But I also don't like my ships to look too blocky, so we have to watch out for that. Something else I didn't mention as well, I've checked it, and thanks to our completion of the game previously, we have 361,000 gold to spend on our fleet. So my hope is to be able to afford 3 of these, 3 tankers, 2 main battleships, or combat ships like frigates or cruiser, not quite cruiser level, or destroyer level maybe, our flagship obviously, and then depending on how much we have left over, a missile carrier ship, unless I decide to put that on my tenders. That's something we're going to look at in a different video. For now, let's build the fleet. So the first thing I want to do is I want to mount my guns very close to the center of mass on this ship. So I actually want them adjacent to the cockpit. And the reason for that is I struggle a lot with convergence and firing shots at somebody far away and the shots not linking up. And it's something I noticed a lot, especially with the Remorseless refit we went through in the last campaign. And a big part of that is because the guns are quite far apart on the ship. So keeping them close to the center means that the shots from me fly a lot better and I have a much better time of tracking them. Something that's really important to me is I want to make sure that my bridge is protected. I don't want any explosive components next to it, so no fuel tanks, no ammo packs. So I'm going to set things up like this just to make sure that I'm not putting anything there. And I want to just set up some superstructure as well because I want to put important components in the center of my ship. I want to put a hull piece here, and I think want to maybe, do I want to bring it down a bit further? I'm just thinking, I want to put a hull piece here and here. That's probably where I'm going to put my generators, and I'm going to put a hull piece here and here for my D30 engines, and then I want to put 2 of these in. I'm thinking here and here for my legs. And I'm just going to mount those now so I don't forget them. So this goes here, and then I want to put my legs in like this. And we'll go for sort of a crab style landing gear. And we'll obviously test this ship out. If it doesn't work, we'll scrap it and try something else. But I'm pretty happy that this is going to do the job. Oh, these aren't attached properly. No, they haven't got any engines, but this isn't attached. So they haven't got power at the moment. Are they at the same angle? I'm not sure if they're at the same angle. Does this need to go up one? No, it was at the right angle before, but I actually want to put this up to the same angle. Nice and splayed, so it's nice and it doesn't have to deal with too much direct straight motion when it comes down. Okay, so that's our basic layout. Now I want to copy something similar to the Lightning, where I want my my NK25s on the outside, just up on top of each other, because I think that gives it really good thrust in those directions. You have to make sure that your NK25s are separated by a separator, so I couldn't put an NK25 here. I couldn't have sort of two pieces. I couldn't have this piece here. The two engines would clash with each other. They wouldn't be able to rotate, so you have to put a spacer in between them. So I'm going to go, oops, I right-clicked on that one. NK25, NK25, NK25. We'll add another hull piece here. And I want to put an NK25 here. So we've got them spaced out across the hull. Now, if I can get away with it, I actually want to put a fifth one here, just to give us some centralized thrust in every direction. These will add rotational thrust. This will add center of mass thrust, a little bit of rotation to the top, but it'll let us thrust upwards and downwards, left and right on the spot, which is quite important. I want to add my generators in now, so I just want to put one here and one here. And you see we've got all this space in the middle of the ship where we can put some important components. Let's just fill in some of the space that I've ended up leaving in the ship here. So we'll put these in here like this, and I'll just put some square pieces in here. Now, if we have some concerns about this design at this point, it's probably that we have no armor. It's quite a square shape, which it's at least not 100% square, so I'm happy with that. I could potentially put some reinforced hull up here, but I'm actually not going to do that. I want to see how well this performs without that. So what I still need to add at this moment is I don't need to worry about this. I don't need to worry about the big ammo. I'm going to put the two small ammo pieces here and here. And that's our guns have their ammo. So it's close to the bridge and it is slightly adjacent, but I think that this center area is the most heavily protected part of our ship. So if we can keep these ammo boxes here, we can make sure they're not going to explode, because if they're exploding, basically the whole ship is exploding. We don't need this generator anymore. We're currently sitting at the correct amount of power we need, the correct amount of ammo we need. We have quite a high IR chance of detection. But our radar sign, apparently we will get detected out to 218 kilometers. So we need to watch out for that. Thrust is 132 megawatts. We're currently got a top speed of 991 kilometers per hour. That's going to change when I start adding these weapons on here, but I really do want a fast ship. So let's look at adding some fuel. I'm going to put a fuel piece here, a fuel piece here, a fuel piece here, and a fuel piece here. We're also, you notice, okay for crew at the moment. We have exactly the right amount of crew for this ship, which is something that I was pushing quite hard to get. I think we can add a fire suppression here and a fire suppression here. So at the moment we only have 4 fuel in the ship, but according to this, we'll have 81 seconds of combat time, which is about a minute and a half. Well, it is a minute and a half. I'm thinking that might be a bit low, but I want to see how that goes, because I don't want to put any fuel up here. I think that's a stupid place to put it. I'm already a bit worried about the fuel here, but I am going to add on a piece of hull here and a piece of hull here. And I'm actually going to add a small piece of hull here and here. One to add as a blade of armor on these sides, but also to add as the missile holders for our zeniths. And then I want to add a flare launcher pointing downwards like this, and I'm actually going to add one here and one here to give us our sort of flares in every direction. So we only have 4 fuel tanks, which is a little bit low. We are now under on crew, but the only crew requirements are each of these missiles requires 2 crew members. So we're missing 4 crew, and I don't think it's worth adding a crew module for 4 crew. It just means that as far as I'm aware, the ship will repair slightly slower and will get slightly less experience. But if this ship is taking garrisons on its own, it's going to get enough experience as it is. And this is really my first thought of a design on this ship. There's a couple of other things I need to quickly add. I need to add some radio antenna, so they can actually radio back to the fleet. That's very important. And I'm also tempted, I need to add some escape pods. I've only got 2 places I can put them, so I'm just going to pop them in there. And now we're up to the full requirement complement of escape pods that we need. We're not getting the whole crew out, but it's enough that the ship will get out. So let's have a look at the stats of the ship. We've got an 8.8 thrust to weight ratio, meaning it's very nippy in combat. Top speed of 788 kilometers per hour, which is incredibly fast. We've got a range of 888 kilometers. I'm not too worried about that because it will have a tanker with it. Consumption 180 tons per 1,000 kilometers. That's not too bad. We've got a firepower of 6, which has been buffed up by the addition of the zeniths. We're quite compact. We weigh 1,500 1,500 tons. We're 22% weapons. We are 32% hulls. We are 9% fuel. Big thrust. Combat time of 81 seconds. I think that's going to be enough. We're bang on with power, bang on with ammo. Our IR sign and our radar sign are low. We have just under our crew complement. At 88% makes it sound really, really bad, but our crew complement is so low that we're only missing 4 crewmen. The price of this ship is 20,860, which is such a small amount of our budget that we can easily afford 3 of these. And if they manage to get us a Tarkin that is worth that much money, as far as I'm concerned, they've paid for themselves. Anything above that is very, very useful. The AK-100 gun that this ship is mounted with can take prox fuse and armor-piercing ammo. So once we get our hands on that, it's cheap and we'll just load up on as much as we can. What I want to do now is just test that this ship works. And going through testing the early garrisons, a difficulty 10 small garrison is what I want this ship to be flying against. I will try it against some difficulty 8 small mid garrisons, but it's probably going to lose against those. But the idea is this ship's not going to be taking those garrisons unsupported. It needs to deal with the difficulty 10 small garrisons to be any use to me. So let's jump into a couple of fights and see how that goes. So you can see we've got quite a large collection of ships here, but this is the type of ships you will see in light garrisons at the start of the game. Maybe not this many, you're probably looking at 4 or 5. The big threats here are the Sarmas and the Flowers as far as I can see. The Ballistics I'm not too worried about. Actually, these Sluggers are our biggest threats. And the reason the Sluggers are the biggest threats is if you look at these ships, 37mm gun, rocket launcher, we can avoid the rockets, 57mm rocket launcher, 130mm, 37mm, 57mm, 130mm. The Sluggers can carry large caliber proximity fuse ammunition, so these are our biggest threats in combat right now. So these are the ones that I will use the Zeniths on in a combat situation. So if I'm coming into a garrison and I'm thinking, right, what's our biggest targets here? The Sluggers, if there are any in the garrison, or the Navarins, are going to be my primary targets for missile barrages. The good news is we're only going to fight 3 of these at a time. The Sarmers are probably the next scariest just because they've got the massed 57mm and that can drill through our lack of armor very, very quickly. So we're just going to have to be very aware of how we're moving. But let's see how this fight goes. So we've got a Courageous up there. We're going to keep the Courageouses alive. And we've got a Ballistic over there. So the Sarma, Sarma is our biggest threat right now. I didn't mean to shoot that down, but that's good. I'm going to be quite quiet when I'm fighting because I want to try and treat these quite seriously. But hopefully you can see how I'm planning to fly this ship. You'll see I just use the flares to just not really worry about doing those massive dodges I used to have to do. We'll just watch out for that 37mm, and we'll just watch out for these rockets as well. Now, the only downside that we have with using the combat simulator is it does not accurately simulate your fuel. So it's going to sit at 100% fuel for the entire fight, which means that I'm not going to get a really good indication of how much fuel I'm burning through. So it's possible that I'm going to have to do some campaign tests and just make sure that the fuel use for this ship is high enough. What's that? That's another ballistic. That's fine. We'll just deal with one of these ballistics, and we'll keep that Courageous alive as long as we can. We obviously need to be careful that we don't lose these missiles before we get a chance to use them. Keep an eye on that Courageous. He's about to open fire. So now we've got a Slugger. We're going to launch a missile at him. And we'll just start shooting at this ballistic while we wait for that. Looks like the missile missed. I'm going to fire my other missile at him. We'll launch flares. That one took him out, and he's down. There's another Courageous on the field, so that's actually quite good for us, because 2 ships with 37mm guns can't do a lot to us. Let's just make sure we don't fly into these rockets. And I know I'm missing a lot, but there's a lot to keep track of, and keeping the ship alive is quite important to me. Like I said, one of the things I really like about the 100mm AK-100s is how forgiving they are, because they reload really, really quickly. So if you're missing shots, it's not actually the end of the world, because you've got another magazine full very quickly. He is very close to dying. Let's just make sure we don't crash into the ground here. Okay, he's down. We've now got a Flower. I've used both of my missiles, so we're just going to have to deal with the rest of this fight with our guns. The best way to deal with a Flower is to get on top of it and destroy all of those missiles before they have a chance to fire them. And I just destroyed all but one in that barrage. Once you destroy the missiles, you pretty much drilled right through to the bridge. That's him down. So now we're probably going to get the other Slugger coming in. Where is he? Let's look for the other ship. One thing you're going to be really careful for is if a ship is off screen and it's targeting to you, do not get the targeting reticle to tell you the shots are incoming, and that's when a prox fuse round can just come in from nowhere and absolutely destroy you. The thing about sluggers is, yes, they're heavily armed, but they're not very well armored. Okay, let's take out these courageous now. And you can see why I think an AK-100 is decent as a fine enough armament for these early garrison ships. So that, I'm quite happy with the performance of the ship there. These are, from my testing, the type of ships you see a lot of. The only thing we didn't get in that fight was a Navarin, which is very similar. Now, if we want to try a more difficult garrison, I'm going to knock this up to difficulty 8. I'm going to go in for small mid, and this is where we'll probably see a gladiator. So we've got a normal gladiator in this combat. We've also got a Nimrod. These are both very scary because this has mass 100mm. This is going to fire all procs fuse at us. This this is a 180mm double-barreled cannon. It's going to fire procs fuse at us as well, and obviously we still have the slugger as well. So we don't have any courageouses either, and courageouses are usually great for just soaking up some enemy attacks. We're just going to fire off some missiles at the start to try and do as much damage as we can to some of the earlier scary enemies. And you've got to watch out for those prox fuse. That's the big danger. Now, the one good thing about this ship, wow, that was a great shot. The one good thing about this ship is it's actually fast enough to dodge a lot of prox fuse from far away, as long as we don't get too close. You can see that I'm able to deal with these 100mm without too much problems. The big problem on top of that, however, is I'm spending a lot of time concentrating on dodging shots and not so much on lining up good shots. Did you notice that the Gladiator there actually split its ammunition and fired off a barrage of standard ammo and then snuck prox fuse into the end of it? Let's see if we can fight this Gladiator. I want to try and take out this armor first, just to give myself breathing room. Oh, I flew into the retreat section at the top of the screen. That's unfortunate. But you can start to see the scariness that is a Gladiator from that. Let's just try that one more time. Difficulty 8, small mid, fight. So what we've got here, we've got two Gladiator MRLs, a Navarin, and a Courageous. So this is a much, much easier dealt. I'm actually really happy when I see the Gladiator MRLs because I can dodge those rockets a hell of a lot better than I can dodge the... that Slugger just launched both of his rockets at us. Let's just deal with him. I didn't mean to launch both of them, but that's fine. That's him gone. So now we're just going to deal with these Gladiators. I'm just going to take the Courageous out because nothing else is going to come in. I don't have to worry about dodging his shots. Okay, and then we deal with these Gladiators. This is a good test for fighting Gladiators because it lets you test your strategies for actually just destroying their hull and getting through their Palash. The best way to deal with a Gladiator is definitely to attack it from below because once you've dealt with that Palash, it doesn't actually have very much armor in the underside of the ship. You also need to just try as hard as you can to get the enemies to shoot through each other. That's when you can really rack up some nice early kills. And you can see how the flares are also really helping me not have to do those really dramatic sweeping moves that I've usually had to do in the old Lightning to try and clear away from them. So I'm saving a lot of fuel and I'm also maintaining my position. And I think having the star pattern on the flares is very important as well because it means that, oh, I wasn't paying too much attention, but you can see we can take a hit in this ship too. And you can see how much damage I've already done to this Gladiator, and he's down from a hit to the ammo. So the Gladiators, as the Ancestor says in Darkest Dungeon, they can be killed. And I know it's not a Gladiator with the standard guns, but we can take out Gladiators with 100mm, and I think that's something that a lot of people kind of don't think is possible. But you obviously have to do a lot more dodging than I'm having to do here. The main advantage for this ship, and I'm really trying to sell it to you, is the speed. I want to take as much territory as I can as quickly as possible and spread out, find Tarkans, find events, and get moving on the campaign. And this ship is going to help me do that. Yes, I'm probably going to lose one to an unfortunate situation with a Gladiator or just not paying attention and getting hit by prox fuse from a Navarin or getting hit with prox fuse from a Slugger. But until that happens, it's going to work for me. And it's a cheap ship and it's very, very fast. So this is the ship design that I'm going to go with. We've got a lot of thrust. I could potentially, if I wanted to drop this thruster, that would drop us down to 694 kilometers per hour. It would give us 96 seconds. Oh, sorry, my dog's outside the door. Give us 96 seconds of combat time. We could probably spend a little bit of time just adding some more armor, speeding up a little bit. I don't want to do that. Every time I've tried to add any reinforced hull or any armor parts to these light ships, it's just such a huge loss of what I really want the thesis of the ship to be, which is a fast striker. So we're going to leave it like this, and I'm going to give the ship its name for when we go into the campaign, and I'm going to call this the Audacity, because how dare I try and use a Lightning-style ship in 1.14 for a hard mode campaign. And you know what? Maybe I'm going to eat those words and I'm going to show you that it's just not possible. And I think that's going to be fun if that happens too. Actually, there is one more test I want to do before we finish. Because we're in 1.14, we can actually test landings. So let's just make sure the ship can actually make it onto the ground okay. I do like my ships to look quite crab-like, and it's something I've just realized recently. It's one of the reasons my aesthetic for ship designs is crabby, rather than bricky or blocky. So let's just see if we can make it down okay. I just want to make sure these landing gears can take the flex. And yeah, they can perfectly. The engines end up on the ground, but I don't think it's going to be too much of a problem. I could maybe just tweak the angle slightly. So I'm just going to do that, actually. I'm just going to grab this here and just put it down by 1 degree. I'll grab this here, put the engine down by 1 degree. And yeah, I'm just going to save that change. So save the Audacity, overwrite the ship, and we have our first ship for the campaign. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave me your comments. Tell me what I've done wrong, because I'm sure I have done some things wrong. But this is going to be the first ship in our fleet. The next ship I want to make a video for is its companion ship, the Skylark-like ship that's going to go around with it and have passive sensors and maybe something a bit more, I'm not sure. But for now, that's everything I want to show you. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.